Item Number SCP-Y-079. Object Class Save. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-Y-079 is contained by non-intervention. Its location within Provisional Reality-Y-1's oceanic transit routes is to remain classified to Site-Y1, Y-0 command staff, and personnel assigned to Project Bleaktide. No permanent outposts, anchored platforms, or manned staging craft are permitted within visual range of SCP-Y-079 following the loss of YV Firm Harbor. All reconnaissance and environmental monitoring is to be conducted via tethered drone, ROV, or remote buoy arrays deployed from a standoff distance of no less than 5 kilometers, and recovered using automated reels to minimize human proximity time. All manned approach operations, authorized only under O5 or Site Director approval, must comply with the following exposure controls due to the airborne particulate fraction designated Salt Silver. No unsealed breathing is permitted within 2 kilometers of any SCP-Y-079 landform aperture, including open deck exposure. Personnel must wear airtight, positive pressure suits with independent air supply. Local air is not to be sampled through rebreather intake systems under any circumstance. Entry into caverns is restricted to single-visit assignments. Any individual who has entered SCP-Y-079 internal airspace is permanently barred from future direct exposure. Rotational staffing is mandatory. Total cavern time is capped at 45 minutes or less per 24-hour period, with a hard lifetime maximum of 3 or less total hours per individual, inclusive of all prior exposure. A minimum 2-person tether and external pull team are required for any cavern insertion to counteract observed rest-seeking behavior and delayed compliance. Post-exposure protocols are mandatory for all personnel who enter the SCP-Y-079 hazard radius. 30-day medical quarantine at Site-Y1, daily respiratory assessment, and scheduled imaging on Day 0, Day 3, Day 7, Day 14, and Day 30, to screen for pulmonary deposition and volumetric restructuring. Any evidence of branching mineralization, thoracic geometry shift, or abnormal oxygenation persistence requires immediate reclassification to Y-79 exposed, transfer to negative pressure isolation, and suspension of the individual from all PRY-1 expedition duty. All suit filters, swabs, and captured aerosol media are to be treated as hazardous anomalous materials and transferred to the dedicated Salt Silver Containment Locker for analysis by the Site-Y1 Core Research Team, who are explicitly prohibited from direct field exposure to SCP-Y-079. Description: SCP-Y-079, colloquially referred to as the Saltlung Atoll, is a chain of low-relief, chalk-white insular structures encountered mid-transit along Oceanic Transit Corridor Y-1, the Bleakway, during Project Bleaktide. From the open ocean, SCP-Y-079 initially presents as a string of partially submerged atolls and shoals, each rarely exceeding 1.8 to 3.4 meters of exposed land above mean sea level, whose defining features is the presence of open, air-filled caverns accessible directly from the surfline. Personnel entering these caverns consistently report the same first impression: warm, breathable air, often described as metallic or coin-like, in a reality where truly safe atmospheric pockets are anomalously uncommon. Subsequent imaging and sampling indicate SCP-Y-079 is not a geological reef system. Each island is instead a calcified biological megastructure with internal geometry consistent with mammalian pulmonary anatomy at extreme scale. Bronchial passage analogs form tunnels and arteriole-like galleries, while alveolar sac analogs form domed chambers, large enough to shelter expedition teams and equipment. These caverns are not inert voids. The entire complex exhibits an extremely slow, repeating cycle of expansion and contraction that correlates with measurable pressure differentials between interior space and the surrounding sea. Functionally, SCP-Y-079 is breathing. Morphology and segmentation. Y-0 survey teams subdivided SCP-Y-079 into segments, also termed lobules in later analysis, due to repeated internal patterning and the tendency for each major island body to behave as a semi-independent unit. Field mapping, combined LiDAR, tether sonar, and Bohr core triangulation suggests the following. Observed segment count: 9 primary lobules, 14 secondary outgrowths. Count fluctuates between returns due to PRY-1 spatial instability, but lobules persist as stable landmarks relative to local drift. Primary lobule diameter, surface ring, 62 to 310 meters. Mean average of 148 meters. Minimum confirmed subsurface depth, greater than 190 meters. Full depth unresolved. Deep returns degrade into interference that resembles exhalation turbulence rather than sediment. Cavern aperture widths, 1.2 to 9.6 meters, often clustered in mouth-like arcs around each lobule's inner rim. Primary conduit bronchus widths, 0.8 to 6.3 meters. Walls show branching with consistent airway bifurcation ratios. Externally, the material is matte white to pale yellow, friable at the surface and easily mistaken for saltstone or chalk. Internally, walls become smoother and more anatomical, displaying laminated rings and spiral ridges that mirror the architecture of bronchi and bronchioles. In several segments, struts and vaulting form a repeating arc pattern, strongly reminiscent of a human ribcage, a resemblance later judged non-coincidental after a documented growth event. Internal atmosphere and particulate profile. Air within SCP-Y-079 caverns remains breathable across all observed segments, with remarkably stable parameters even when exterior conditions fluctuate, such as fog events, pressure surges, or time-dilated squalls. Baseline readings recorded during YEX-04 include temperature 28.1 to 33.7 Celsius, segment dependent, anomalous stability within a given chamber, often only shifting plus or minus 0.4 Celsius over hours. Relative humidity 66 to 92%. Pressure typically plus 1.8 to 6.2 kPa above ambient sea level pressure, variable with the breath cycle of SCP-Y-079. O2 fraction 20.1 to 23.4%. CO2 fraction 0.04 to 0.31%. Raises sharply during active occupancy, then returns to baseline without ventilation equipment. The most distinctive feature is a persistent silver-gray sheen visible in oblique light beams and helmet lamps, particularly during exhale phases. Air sampling consistently identifies an anomalous aerosol load with the following properties: dominant particulate, sodium chloride microcrystals, and salt films. Trace metallic content, elevated Ag signatures, plus iron and copper traces consistent with the reported metallic odor. Particle size distribution, heavily weighted toward respirable fractions, with a secondary cluster of ultrafines that pass through several standard shipboard filters. Despite high particulate counts, occupants frequently report improved subjective breathing and reduced fatigue, an effect that persists long enough to encourage extended rest periods and, in multiple cases, direct resistance to extraction orders. This comfort response is currently unresolved, whether mimetic, neurochemical, or purely physiological, e.g., hyperoxygenation combined with mild anesthetic aerosolization, remains unconfirmed. Notably, the atoll's atmosphere shows non-passive gas behavior. CO2 accumulation from multiple personnel is observed to decrease even when chambers are sealed, and oxygen levels rebound without mechanical circulation. This implies either a functional gas exchange interface operating through calcified tissue into surrounding seawater, or B, an ontological stable pocket effect, in which atmospheric composition is forcibly corrected toward habitable norms. Both hypotheses are supported by the structure's repeating pressure cycle, but neither explains the absence of detectable metabolic heat expected from a living organ of this size. Breathing cycle and exchange phenomenon. Each primary lobule exhibits a low-frequency cycle resembling respiration. Mean cycle length 9 to 14 minutes. Inhale phase. Chamber pressures drop. Airflow trends inward from apertures. Interior haze thins. Surf noise becomes muffled, as if damped by soft tissue. Exhale phase. Chamber pressures rise. Warm air spills outward. Aerosol sheen intensifies. Exterior waters show brief surface slicks and microbubble bands. Instrumented tethers placed at several apertures record a consistent anomaly. Airflow direction reversals occur without corresponding wind shifts outside the structure. The caverns behave like lungs opening to the sea, but the diaphragm mechanism remains unidentified. No muscular contractions have been observed. Instead, flexion appears to occur through minute changes in internal geometry, calcified struts and porous walls subtly giving, as though they retain biomechanical compliance despite mineralization. Seawater samples taken immediately adjacent to active apertures show localized increases in dissolved oxygen and suspended microcrystals, as if the atoll is oxygenating the sea and exhaling salt-silver particulates simultaneously. The purpose of this exchange is unknown. Growth and assimilation. While SCP-Y-079 provides a conditional haven, extended occupancy produces a consistent pathological progression in humans. Personnel who remain within SCP-Y-079 caverns beyond several hours begin to exhibit the following. 1. Persistent cough, often dry despite high humidity. 2. Reports of a metallic taste. 3. Chest tightness and shallow hooking breaths. 4. Transient euphoria and a calming effect. 5. Reduced willingness to leave, commonly rationalized as just resting a little longer, or through excuses of attempting to finish their job. Radiographic scans conducted aboard Y-0 after exposure show mineral deposition within pulmonary tissue, first as diffuse salt fog opacities, then as branching filaments that follow bronchial trees. In advanced cases, deposits from rib-like arcs and nodules that visually resemble SCP-Y-079's internal struts. Expedition medics described the phenomenon as lungs evolving to the atoll's shape. The most severe documented event occurred when a Y-0 recon element remained inside SCP-Y-079 to continue mapping beyond authorized limits. Upon fleet return days later, the team's bodies were absent, and additional lung islands were present where none had been charted previously. New growths showing partial architectural resemblance to human thoracic anatomy, such as rib-like vaulting, sternum-like ridges, and chamber proportions consistent with human scale but enlarged. Whether SCP-Y-079 is converting biological lung tissue into calcified extensions, printing new lobules from respiratory patterns and residual aerosols, or simply selecting a reality state in which the missing personnel became additional structure, remains unresolved. All three possibilities fit PRY-1 behavior, and SCP-Y-079 provides evidence for each without conclusively supporting any single model. The Stranded Outpost and out-of-order transmissions. Due to the structure's strategic value as a mid-route staging point, one smaller vessel, the YV Firm Harbor, was intentionally left grounded as a forward outpost staffed by personnel with terminal prognoses. Contact was maintained intermittently. However, due to documented time drift along the Bleakway, Site Y1 and the fleet received transmissions out of sequence. Early pleas for extraction, arriving after later messages of calm acceptance. Later transmissions include repeated sensory descriptions of breathing, quote, for the fleet, and the reported sensation of, quote, breathing the ocean. The final received signal is characterized by labored respiration, wet crackling, and an unusual message.
I see the trees. The sap. The sap shines like the moon. It holds.
The transmission then degrades into a gurgling hiss and terminates. The final statement is of high analytical interest due to its apparent linkage to the Y0 expedition's primary objective, e.g., the forest with trees that weep silver sap. The nature of that linkage is unknown. SCP-Y-079 may be a waypoint that points toward the forest, a biological offshoot of the same source, or a conversion mechanism that produces witness states, e.g., visions, temporal bleed-through, or location crosstalk, unresolved scientific questions. SCP-Y-079 remains classified as a biological megastructure in working documentation, but its true nature is still undetermined. Current unresolved questions include: origin. No known PRY-1 fauna matches the implied scale of a parent organism. No remains, skeleton, or connecting body have been detected. SCP-Y-079 may be an organ separated from its host, a colony form, or a structure that was never part of an organism in the conventional sense. Metabolism versus ontology. Gas regulation occurs without expected heat signatures or nutrient pathways. SCP-Y-079 may be performing gas exchange through non-biological means, such as ontokinetic stabilization, localized law enforcement of breathable air, or a self-correcting pocket of reality. The silver aerosol, salt silver. The silver-bearing particulate is consistent across segments and increases during exhale phases. Whether this aerosol is a byproduct, a lure, a defense, a biological necessity, or a signaling medium remains unknown, but its similarity to the expedition's silver sap target is considered non-random. Assimilation mechanism. Mineral deposition in human lungs appears dose-dependent and accelerates with comfort, rest, and unmasked breathing. It is unknown whether SCP-Y-079 actively encourages prolonged exposure, such as through mimetic or chemical compulsion, or whether the compulsion is emergent. Subjects simply feel better and therefore desire to stay. Segment growth. The appearance of new lobules after personnel disappearances implies either accretion, conversion, or a retroactive editing event. No direct observation of growth has been captured, only before and after surveys and the sudden existence of additional structure. In summary, SCP-Y-079 is a rare anomaly along the Bleakway that behaves as a temporary refuge while simultaneously functioning as a slow conversion sink. A place that lets humans breathe easily long enough to rewrite what lungs mean, and then quietly adds the result to its shoreline. Addendum Y-79-IR1. The following transmissions were received intermittently from the intentionally stranded forward outpost vessel, YV Firm Harbor, due to documented time drift effects affecting Phase 4 communications. The Y-Not crew received these logs out of order. This transcript reflects Site Y1's best reconstruction of chronological progression. Recovered speaker, Dr. Elias Harrow. Lead researcher assigned to YV Firm Harbor. Additional personnel referenced: Chief Engineer Owen Kersey, Corpsman Maribel Santos, and Specialist Jonah Pell. Begin log.
Firm Harbor, Log 1. Timestamp, unreliable. Marking it as dock event plus 32 minutes after the Y-Not broke away for its 2-day scout. If anyone is listening later, this is Dr. Elias Harrow, acting lead on the stranded outpost assignment. The atoll presents as a chain of chalk-white rings barely breaking the surface. Caverns are open to air, you can stand inside them and breathe. Really breathe. Warm. Slight metallic taste, like pennies and antiseptic. We did the quick and dirty safety pass before command cast-off. Grabbed samples at cave mouths, mid-tunnel, and deepest dome. Filters show mostly nitrogen-oxygen and expected ratios. CO2 low, humidity high. No obvious toxins on the shipboard sniffers. Nothing screaming, "Don't inhale!" And that's the first problem. Nothing here screams. Everything is so quiet. Calm. Note for later analysis. Pal swears the atoll is breathing, and if it is breathing, it's too slow to catch in a casual watch. If you stand still for an hour, you'll swear the air never changes, but the condensation on the wall shifts directions like a tide. We ran imaging along the nearest ring. Sonar doesn't read rock. It reads tissue. Calcified. Yes, but porous, layered, and patterned. The tunnels branch like bronchial tubes. The domes, alveolar sacs. The atoll? It's a lung, or several lungs fused into the reef. The outer rim is hard as bone. Inside, the walls are sponge stone that compresses under pressure and rebounds slowly. If you put your palm flat and wait, the surface gives, not like foam, like living cartilage refusing to admit it's alive. Kersey says he can feel vibration through the deck plates when the tide hits the ring. Santos says it's the opposite. The ring hits the tide. I'm flagging the air again. The warmth isn't environmental, it's metabolic. Something is maintaining a temperature gradient against an ocean that should be stealing heat. We started the deeper analysis in the actual lab bay. Full spectrum, particulate capture, repeated runs. The preliminary safe to breathe call was incomplete. Not wrong, just naive. Like declaring a room safe because the floor isn't lava. There's an unknown element. A fraction in the samples that behaves like aerosolized mineral. But it won't stay in one category. It plates the inside of glass like a salt bloom, then resuspends itself at agitation. Under the scope, it looks like bright dust, hexagonal glints. Until you change the angle and it becomes a smear of light. Spectronomy refuses to settle. Same sample gives different peaks depending on whether the machine is grounded to ship power or running on its own isolated cells. It's as if the particles notice the context. In all my years, I've never seen anything like this. I'm naming the unknown element salt silver for now. Not because it's silver, but because it wants to be treated like one. It keeps trying to behave like a noble metal, non-reactive, clean, final, and then it does something impossible and reminds you that it's neither metal nor final. Key anomaly. Particulate mass readings drift negative at intervals, not just lighter than expected, but negative. As if the filter gains something that subtracts weight. All my years in the pursuit of science are starting to feel like a sham at this rate. Santos reports mild chest tightness across the whole crew. Pal says it feels good, like the first deep breath after surfacing from a long dive. Kersey is coughing, dry, occasional, then stops and says he never felt clearer. This is likely where the anomaly hides. It doesn't punish first, it rewards. Pulse oximetry is elevated across the board, not by a little, by enough that Santos checked the unit twice and swore at it. Heart rate's down, sleep improved, mood improved, everyone feels great. Pal even started whistling, if you can believe that. I've only ever heard him grumble since he screwed up at Site and was punished. Transferred to Site-Y-1. I ordered reduced exposure time in the caverns. Nobody argued. Nobody wanted to argue. With the typical mood this crew would have, seemingly gone to the wind. That's also a problem. Kersey came to me privately, said his breath sounds bigger. His words. Like there's room inside him he didn't have yesterday. We ran X-ray, then we ran it again because I didn't believe it. There's mineral deposition along the distal bronchi. Not random dusting, no. Structured. Branching. The pattern matches the atoll's tunnel geometry within a margin of error that should not exist between a human organ and a damn coastline. And the volume. Good God. Kersey's lungs are expanding in a way that doesn't respect his rib cage. The silhouette pushes into spaces it should not occupy. Not rupture, reshape. Like the body is making room. Santos asked if it's edema. I said no. Pell asked if it's adaptation. He smiled when he said it. Pell doesn't smile. Salt. Silver is not just in the air, it's in us. It's acting like scaffolding, like a template. Air is compromised. Repeat, air is compromised. Initial sampling missed an anomalous particulate fraction, designated salt, silver, present in all cavern air layers. It is physically inconsistent and appears to interact with instrumentation and biological tissue. This element does not follow any known rules. We have confirmed internal changes consistent with the atoll's morphology, that being mineral deposition and volumetric lung restructuring. Symptom onset correlates with exposure duration, but is masked by pronounced subjective well-being. This is an infection that feels like a relief. I recommend you do not attempt retrieval. I am formally advising you leave firm harbor in place until we can determine if removal accelerates conversion or causes mass casualty. I am aware of what I'm saying. I am also aware that if you take us back, you may bring the atoll into your ship's lungs. We will continue research. We will continue reporting. We have 2 days. If you don't return, I will assume you listened. Santos is missing. I locked the interior hatches last night. I verified. Kersey verified. Al joked about me sealing the air away. This morning, Santos' bunk is made, boots aligned, her workstation wiped down as if she never used it. That kind of behavior is not like Santos. She's more likely to ruin a room like a tornado than to tidy it. And the hatch, which was ordered to remain shut, is open. No forced entry, no damage, no blood, just open. Like it had always been open, and our memory of it being closed is the error. But the problem being, I'm the only one with the keycard to open it. How did she get out? I'm going outside. There's a new ring. It wasn't here yesterday. It's small, maybe 30 meters across, chalk white, barely breaking the surface. The caverns are shallow domes. The openings look like spaces between ribs. We'll explore the new island, since locking ourselves up doesn't seem to be doing anything. Here's to hoping Santos just got curious and decided to explore it. Kersey is gone. Pell is gone. I didn't see them leave. I didn't hear the hatches. Last night, though, I heard breathing. Not the ship's vents. Something slow. Patient. Like the world inhaling through stone. It was directly in my ears. Like it was close. All around me. Now that I think about it, it doesn't make me panic. Found their personal effects arranged with the new Afrin mouth. Neat. Like offerings. And now there are 3 rings in the waterline. 3, each different. Each wrong in a way my mind wants to interpret as anatomy. One has a collapsed dome that looks like a shoulder blade. One has an arch that looks like a jaw. Teeth, suggested by calcified struts. It's hard to be afraid when every breath feels like it was designed for you. I reran my own scan. I waited until I was calm so my hands wouldn't shake and ruin the readings. The deposition is there. The branching is there. The extra room Kersey described. Now I understand. It isn't pain. It's permission. My lungs are learning to evolve. Salt silver doesn't behave like a contaminant. It behaves like a sealant. Like it's lining the inside of something that shouldn't open yet. A box, a door, a mouth. And it's telling me, quietly, that holding shut is a job, a duty, a necessary thing. Why not command? If you ever hear this, we call it a safe harbor. You were right in the way a trap is right. It lets you rest. It lets you... It lets you forget you're bleeding until you stand up and realize the bandage is part of your skin. I can breathe the ocean for a fleet. I think that's what it wants. I think that's what it made us for. We have a duty to fulfill, a promise to keep, a debt to pay. The atoll exhales, and the caverns glow. Just a little like moonlight caught in the dust. It was so obvious. I understand. Now, why the others went without a fight. It wasn't compulsion. It wasn't relief. It was being invited into a shape you were already becoming. Become 1. Become 2. Become 3. For the fleet. There are trees. Not here, no. Ahead. In the dark beyond the root, the sap shines like moons. Like the idea of moons. Like something you can hold in your lungs without drowning. A desperate bud illuminating the way. A bloom in the dark. Awaiting our promise. And the gnashing out there, the endless gnashing, it doesn't stop. The many eyes in the dark, they reach for the singular, defiant, lonely bloom. So the duty must be fulfilled by we. Pandora's box must stay shut. Salt, silver, is good at shutting things. It is sacred because it is strong. It is strong because it does not care what reality says mass is, or what a body says lungs are, or what an island says it can't be. We see the trees, the sap shines like the moon. It holds. Duty bound, I will hold.
This is Director Waller, signing off on another report at Site Y1. I hope you consider subscribing to stay up to date with our latest findings. I eagerly look forward to having your audience in future reports.